All right, folks, we're going to go ahead and get started. My name is Matt Bose. I'm the Assistant Director here at the library. Thank you for coming out this evening. Before we get to tonight's program, I'll just mention that we do have some flyers over on the table back there of other upcoming events. We have movie screenings, we have historical lectures, we have a free yoga class coming up, and a local travel author is going to be here soon too. So lots of great stuff happening. Go ahead and pick one of those up on the table. We also have some evaluation forms. If you don't mind giving us a little feedback, we'd love to hear where you heard about tonight's program so we know where to advertise, and any feedback at all, any program ideas you have for us. So please fill those out. And you can also put your email address on here, and you can join our email bulletin. We send it out every 2 weeks, and it includes all of our programs and new services. So please join that too if you're interested. So we're very thankful to Fish and Game and to our two speakers this evening, Doug Whitfield and Dennis Walsh. They are very well qualified and have lots of interesting information for us. Dennis worked for a long time as an animal control officer for Manchester Police Department, and now he is a fish and game hunting educator. And Doug has been an outdoorsman and hunter all his life, and he has a whole bunch of knowledge about bears as well as wildlife in general. He lived in bear country for a long time, so we're very thankful. Thank you both for being here. And tonight we'll be learning about understanding bobcats in New Hampshire, so it should be an interesting evening. I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. I'm Doug Whitfield. Dennis is going to start off the program and the start of it, but just wanted to inform you folks of a couple of things that are happening. Number one is on April 18th, Fish and Game has what's called Discovered Wild New Hampshire Day, which is held at Fish and Game on Hazen Drive in Concord. It's a great, great way to spend some time and learn about ecological situations. They cover not just hunting and fishing. There are all types of displays put on by many, many companies that are interested in the outdoors. So if you've got youngsters that you know that want to learn a little about what goes on at the Fish and Game and what they provide, it's a great resource for people if they take advantage of it. And as I say, that's going to be on the 18th of April. It's 10 to 3. It's absolutely free. It's the only show I know of around it. They don't want to charge you when you go in. It's a freebie and well worth the take. A couple of other things that Fish and Game does, which are great resources for people and very interesting, is they printed a magazine called Wildlife Journal, which is probably the most informative wildlife magazine you could ever get. And it's about New Hampshire's wildlife, and it's about some of the success stories that New Hampshire has in reintroduction, which Dennis will get into with the wildlife restoration programs that are being run in New Hampshire. Very, very good, very reasonable priced magazine. I think there's only 4 a year that come out. And they also print the finest calendar on wildlife that you'll ever find. It outperforms the national wildlife calendars and everything else. Fabulous photography. And these are available. You can still get them up there for this year at the Fish and Game office. But some very, very good resources and great reading if you get the magazine and subscribe to that magazine. It supports Fish and Game as well. And they're a desperate division in the state of New Hampshire for financing. They've got a lot of things dumped on them to do as their job, but our legislature in its infinite wisdom refuses to finance them. So just give them jobs, but don't give them any money. So they do need all they can get, and well worth supporting. With that, Dennis is going to start the program.
Good evening. As Doug said, my name is Dennis Walsh, and what did you get here? What?
You talk and I'll play with this.
All right. Here we go. What we're going to talk about tonight is Bobcat program in New Hampshire. And I say program because Fish and Game has management plans for all the animals that they deal with. They work with non-game species, they work with game species. Currently they're starting to have meetings up in Concord and other area regional offices on the 10-year plan coming up. They've got to lay out the next management plan for the next 10-year cycle, which they tweak and change as they go along, and they seek public input on these plans. Fish and Game, you know, we're representing Fish and Game, so I'm not saying this just because we're representing them, because we don't get paid to do this, so there's no benefit in that for us. They are the most responsive department in the state, I think, honestly, when it comes to public input, rapport with the public, listening to the public, requesting assistance from the public. Fish and Game is right there with us. So as they have these hearings, if any of you ever thought that you may want to attend, make some suggestions, they'll listen to you. The Fish and Game Commission is, I don't know, like 10, 12 commissioners from around the state. Well, there's one from every county, so you got 10 counties. They have their commission meeting every month. Again, the public can attend. I've gone to meetings up there on animals, animal issues, hunting issues, where we've had people that are anti-hunters to the core come in, stand up, voice their opinions. They're just as welcome as anybody else, because we are all together responsible for managing the animals in New Hampshire. So Fish and Game takes everybody's input. So, you know, whatever your take is on it, it doesn't matter. So that's what Fish and Game is doing with their management plans. As we talk about Bobcats tonight, we're going to talk some about that management plan, but the background of animals in New Hampshire, going from the earliest settlers on. Animal facts, Bobcat facts, complaints, abatement measures, attempts at abatement, balancing the animals with the public. Reasons for conflicts, research results, and funding. Where does all the money come from to do this? So we're going to talk probably a lot about that tonight. We're not passing the hat, we're not collecting money, we're not fundraisers, but I'll tell you who is, I'll tell you where it comes from. So, this has got to do with funding, which we will talk about. And as we look at this slide, many, many, many years ago, you know, go back to the earliest settlers in the 1600s. Folks came from Europe. They saw this. You know, they saw all these animals, and they saw a wealth of these animals out there, and fish, you know, forests, and open areas, and rivers, and you know, the ocean, the shoreline. And they said, wow, this is amazing. Where we left in Europe, we don't have this. It's gone. Why was it gone? Because they overused it. So, when they saw this, and they settled in, and they took advantage of it, and they lived off this land, and it was good for them, they also got another idea. People being people, what we are, we think money. All the time. Didn't matter 1600, you know, they're still thinking money too. And maybe a little greed creeps in. Where they left in Europe, it was cold. Furs were in great demand. They saw fur-bearing animals here. They saw a lot of beaver. Millions of beaver. Beaver hats were a big thing over in Europe. So they said, aha, we trap these animals, we kill them, we take these pelts, these go back to Europe, and we are going to be rolling in dough. So they did. Not just beaver, but other fur-bearing animals as well. They were just, they were running wild through these animal populations. The clicker didn't click. In addition to taking all these animals, they were clearing land. They were cutting down trees. More settlers were coming. Towns were building up. They needed that resource, that natural resource out there, so they took it. In doing that, they hurt the animals. Not only were they trapping and hunting and killing so many animals, but they destroyed habitat. Habitat is a big, big thing when it comes to animals. We can't have animals unless they have proper habitat. We need to manage habitat. That's part of what Fish and Game does. Well, these people killed habitat as well. They just didn't understand all this. If you go back to the buffalo herds, how many millions of buffalo ran in this country? You know, just out in the plains, they said that it would just be endless herds coming, miles of them coming across. What did we bring that number down to? How many in the end? You know, I mean, they're almost extinct, gone. They've come back now thanks to efforts of conservationists, people that took an interest in the animals, but these settlers didn't understand this stuff. A little bit of greed in there, yeah. You know, when you drop a buffalo, and you take that hide and you walk away and leave the rest of it laying there, yeah, there's greed. The Indians didn't do that. People say, oh, the Indians hunted the animals. They killed all the buffalo. Yeah, of course the Indians hunted the buffalo, but how many buffalo are you going to take with an arrow or a spear and running after them or on the back of a horse or sending dogs in after them? You know, the Indians didn't take these things out. The white guy did. The white man settler did it. Did not use the entire animal like the Indians either. They didn't have respect for the animals like the Indians did. That's the greed part. Beaver, they trapped. Beaver in New Hampshire from 1750, so let's say around 1650, just for kicks, maybe we started taking out beaver in big numbers. By 1750, only 100 years later, they were gone. Beaver in New Hampshire were not around. 150 years later, 1900, beavers started to come back. 150 years we went without beaver. Back up. In 1900, some conservationists got together. Guys like Aldo Leopold, if you ever heard that name. Teddy Roosevelt is another one. Big hunters, naturalists, conservationists, sportsmen joined in, and some scientists joined in. Biologists. And they said in 1900, look, we got no beaver. The deer are way down, the moose are way down, the buffalo is just about gone. What is going on here? I mean, we fished and fished and fished. We built dams, we've changed things, animals are disappearing. Somebody said, we gotta have conservation. Okay, we're gonna have conservation. How are we gonna do this? We're gonna limit hunting seasons, or limit hunting. We're gonna create seasons, which was not the first time that was ever done. I mean, that's been done centuries ago. That was done in other countries. So we're gonna have hunting seasons, and we're gonna sell hunting licenses, and we're gonna control how many animals you can take. You can't just go out and kill them all. We're gonna limit you on this. We're gonna enforce these laws. All right, we'll try it. Well, they did. They did relocating of animals. They tried to bring back animals, like the beaver in New Hampshire that was gone, okay? We bring some beaver in. Maybe we can start building this population back up. Later years, we saw this done in Turkey. So they started doing this in different places around the country, relocating animals, trying to bring back numbers, and it worked. It was doing well. But it's expensive. It costs money. It plateaued. Now where do we go? Look, 1937, a group of people got together again, same idea, conservationists, sportsmen, biologists, scientists, and they said, how can we do this? Gun manufacturers also were involved in this. So sportsmen and gun manufacturers said, if we pay a tax on things that we buy for hunting, ammunition, firearms, bows, arrows, hunting equipment in general, if we pay a tax on this, and we let the federal government manage this money, we can have money, more money for conservation. Willingly, these people said, Uncle Sam, please, tax us. Now, who ever heard of that happening? But it did. Honestly, it did. So in 1937, they created this Pittman-Robertson Act. Pittman and Robertson were congressman and senator, one or the other. And they said, we'll write the bill, we'll put it through Congress if we can. And it did. It did go through. So this became a law. This money was collected from all these sales and held at the federal level and then gets back out to the states. Well, now this was a big thing. It says right there, a dramatic natural turnaround. It sure was, because look at the money now we had for this. This thing wants to sleep, though. At any rate, the money was collected, and it went toward, you know what, if his computer isn't going to work, I got some papers over here that'll work. Yeah, I got the mouse. Here, you can have that back. So,
What do you want to do with those?
I can look at the slides right here. So all this hunting, archery equipment anyway, we're paying 11% tax. Later on, later years, you know, like early 50s, whatever, they passed another tax, 10%, on all handgun sales. Not just handguns for hunting purposes, but it was now all handgun sales. So all ammunition, all handguns today are taxed, as well as rifles, for conservation money. Let me tell you something. A few years ago, when there was a big run on buying firearms and ammunition, and none of these stores to keep the stuff in stock, you know how much money went to the federal government in conservation money? It just exploded. I mean, they have collected billions of dollars since 1937 toward all this stuff. A few years ago, when this happened, you could not buy ammunition. The cost doubled on ammunition, automatically, tripled in some cases. You couldn't find firearms that you wanted. The federal government had all that money to deal out conservation, and they did. New Hampshire got a lot more money than they'd been getting. So all those sales, as much as people said, oh, this is wrong, you know, we're just selling too many guns in this country, conservation did very well because of it. Now, when this money is collected, this Pittman-Robertson money, there are some stipulations. It cannot be used for anything except bringing back habitat and wildlife. But another stipulation to get the money every state has to take their money that they get from the sale of licenses. Now, this guy right here is buying a hunting license up at headquarters in Concord. Every state needs to keep this license money set aside in a special fund, and it cannot be used for anything else except fishing and game purposes, animal purposes. Over the years, New Hampshire, as well as many other states, have had to fight politicians and the legislatures to keep that money sacred. Because some people don't understand what it's all about, and if they can throw that into the general fund, they're very happy to do it, because it offsets shortages in the general fund. If that money is used for anything else other than what it's supposed to be, the federal government stops contributing to the state. New Hampshire today is receiving somewhere around $6 million a year in conservation money, Pittman Robertson money. That is significant. Being that Fish and Game is self-funded, it doesn't live off our tax money. It doesn't get money from the general fund to run their operation. So this is significant money. If they misuse license money, not only do they not get the $6 million, but there is another kicker there that the government puts out that they're going to lose as well. We'll come to that. Well, what's the benefit to receiving all this Pittman Robertson money every year? It's conservation money. Well, they automatically get it. Fish and Game every year gets this amount of money. The formula is worked out by how many acres we have here in the state of New Hampshire, and I don't know, animals and license sales and all this. There's a lot of stuff factored in at the federal level, and that determines how much each state is going to get. Well, of course, there's states that receive a lot more than us, and there's probably some that receive less. That money can go toward ongoing projects. If you have something that's going to run, like I said, they have a 10-year game plan, management plan. Well, there's a lot of science involved in this plan. So we got to fund it. We have $6 million a year coming into the state. Fish and Game has to distribute this among different divisions in a department. But everybody knows they're going to receive a certain amount of money every year, and they can keep their projects going. They don't need to worry about funding. Okay, at the end of the year, am I going to get funding for next year? It's going to happen. All they need to do is show where the money went. So they offset their money with expenditures over here, and part of their expenditures are us, volunteer help to Fish and Game. They figure out how many hours we put in, they put a value to our hours, our mileage, our travel time, everything, total it up, that goes in, that's part of the offset to the money that they receive. This is a non-competitive process, receiving this money. If you can find that slide.
They don't have one.
Right there. You can find that?
Okay. Just what projects are relevant?
Okay, it's a non-competitive process. What we mean by non-competitive is, you don't want to read slides anyway. Non-competitive means you're going to get the money. New Hampshire doesn't compete against Massachusetts or Maine or Vermont to get money. We're going to get it. It's coming. It's used for any projects that promote enhancement of wild bird or mammal populations and are supported by state Fish and Game. The money only goes to agencies in states that are responsible for animals. That's it. Nobody else in the state can. Only the agency which is directly responsible for the habitat creation, the management of the animals, the conservation, can get the money to do it. Now, I said that if we mismanage the money, we're gonna lose a lot. This money comes to the state and federal money will pay for any project the state's working on to bring back animals, conservation. The federal government will pay 75% of the project, the state pays 25%. In other words, if the state spends $25,000 for something, the federal government's going to give us $75,000, and we have $100,000. There is a facility up in Holderness, New Hampshire, an all-work educational center. There's a lot of hunter education training goes on up there, classes to the general public on all kinds of things. Anybody go up there and just attend a class or seminar. It's all free. It's $1 million facility up there. They've got many, many acres. They've got a beautiful building. They've got firing ranges. They've got shotgun range. They got all kinds of stuff up there. $1 million it costs to put this thing together. New Hampshire paid $70,000, period, to have this thing in place. Some of the land was donated by some people, I'll grant you that. But still, we're talking $1 million facility costs the state $70,000. So you see how important this money is to New Hampshire. Who funds this money? Sportsmen. That's the big point. Sportsmen are the conservationists that are floating the boat all over the country for conservation. The money is used for many projects, other things. Moose studies. Moose in New Hampshire in 1960. Find one. Show me one. Somewhere in the state. Show me a moose in 1960. You know, like the beaver, they were right down. They started working on moose. They started trying to bring back the moose. By a few years ago, we were up to about 8,000 moose in the state of New Hampshire. We had moose hunting seasons now. They were running by lottery, only taking out, you know, a few hundred a year, balancing, managing the herd. Well, right now they're down to about 4,000 probably, because there's something going on with them. The Fish and Game is studying. Biologists are working real hard on this. They think winter tick is bringing them down. But that's an aside. We did get up to 8,000 moose by managing herds properly. Turkey. They tried with a flock of turkeys from West Virginia. They tried to bring them back in the state. They relocated them out in the western part of the state. No, those turkeys they did on this part of the state. They did them in, what's that, out there in Raymond,
On the coast of Place Park.
State Park out
Yeah.
there. Pawtuckaway, yeah, thank you. They put them in Pawtuckaway, and they thought that they were going to work, but they didn't. They didn't survive the winter. These were from West Virginia. I think they traded some fishers to get some turkeys to West Virginia. Well, then they tried again. They got some turkeys from New York, upstate New York. Brought them over, and they relocated them to the western part of New Hampshire. And they took. And as they grew, the flocks grew, they would take turkeys from here, trap them, bring them over to another part of the state, and they'd grow over there. Same thing, locate to another part of the state. But they didn't just move turkeys around, they built habitat too. Remember I said habitat is very, very critical of having the animals. If we don't have the habitat, we can't have the animals. So they went out, they planted crabapple trees. They did everything they could to provide turkey food. And it worked. We have how many turkeys in the state now? Yeah, too many, some people say. We've got them all the way up to Colossus County. We have places where traditionally, historically, turkeys weren't even showing. We have them there now. So this program really worked well. Hunter education is completely funded by Pittman Robertson conservation money. 100% by Pittman Robertson money. This is up in Holderness at that facility I was telling you about. Oops, I'm sorry. I'm gonna trip right over her. Yeah. I wasn't. So as these studies went on, they also were studying Bobcat. So that kind of brings us to what we're going to talk about tonight, the statistics and the science of the Bobcat study. The Bobcat has increased all over the state, in big part thanks to the turkey population that increased, because that's a good food source for these cats. So as the turkeys increase, the Bobcats increase, and they're showing up way up in the state now where they haven't been before. So at this point, knowing where all this money came from, Doug is going to come in and he's going to talk about the Bobcat itself. But another thing that happened around 1950, and that slide didn't come up here, two guys, Senator and Congressman, got together, Dingell and Johnson, and they made the Dingell-Johnson Act. That was going to tax fishing stuff. So Pittman Robertson was so successful, they saw it working, they tried it for fishing. So now we had two things going. Tax on fishing, tax on hunting stuff, to bring back fish, create habitat for fish. It worked well, they put them together, and together became the Wildlife and Sport Fishing Restoration Act. Escaping line in the way. That takes us up anyway to this Bobcat right here, so I'm gonna let Doug come in on that one.
I'm gonna go back to the start just to show you something. Right there. This picture of the game that was available in New Hampshire when the settlers first came, and in such abundance as Dennis mentioned. I was wondering if you people recognize this here. Who knows what that is?
The lynx.
Right, it's a lynx. Why is that different from the bobcat? Go back and I'll show you why, because that always comes up when we talk about that. The lynx has these particularly long tufts of hair, which the bobcat does not have. The other thing that's a distinguishing characteristic is the lynx has a black ring around the entire end of his tail. And the bobcat doesn't. Bobcat only has a black on top of his tail. The tail is only 5 or 6 inches long, but you can see it when the tail is extended. The lynx has it going all the way around, and the bobcat has it just on top. Also, the lynx has much larger feet than the bobcat, which is why it's much more adept at surviving in the New England weather which we have. Now we go back to where we were before. And here you have the bobcat. And the state of New Hampshire has done an extensive program on trying to determine what they need to do to get the bobcat to grow in population. And that's a picture of our guy. This shows you the geographic range. It's not really dark enough for you to see it, but it's kind of grayish. And bobcat were native to southern Mexico all the way up to southern Canada. They did not go much north of southern Canada, again, because of the extreme winters, and the bobcat doesn't have the foot to keep them up on the snow like the lynx does. And they didn't get along. Lynx and bobcat don't get along, and that's the lynx's territory right there. This shows, prior to today, as we're dealing today with lynx and bobcat, shows where the bobcat